Could you promise our viewers that a new single-payer system would pay for abortions?
Well, I'll promise our viewers that I'm going to work as governor, first of all, to pass a single-payer health care system, and secondly, that since abortion is legal in Vermont, I would not want a system that treats poor women differently than rich women. So the answer is yes, of course it would be inclusive of all Vermonters.
Dr. Richter, do you believe that a woman's right to choose is at risk in Vermont under the present administration?
I think under Brian Doobie, if Brian Doobie were elected, I think it would be at risk. I do, absolutely, because he opposes it. So I do think that, again, many of our rights, especially on a national level, are slowly being eroded away. And we certainly need people to represent us who, majority of people believe in a woman's right to choose. And that should be something that should be continued. It's legal. And I think if we had Brian Doobie as governor, that would be what would be a problem.
You know, Terry, he's going to argue that it's been settled. And what I'm going to ask Brian is, this question: if it's been settled, why is it that those who want to turn back, who want to take away a woman's right to choose, why have they, in the last year, in 18 states, passed laws that have been signed into law that restrict a woman's right to choose? Why is it that the national organizations have decided that they need to fight this state by state because they're not making progress in Washington under President Obama? So I would say this is a very dangerous time for any state to have a governor who, as part of his agenda, opposes Roe versus Wade.
Even under Douglas, they've been nibbling away at the right.
Well, in fairness to Governor Douglas, he does support a woman's right to choose, and he has not eroded abortion rights.
So it would be a really much more dangerous situation
Yes.
if Doobie got elected.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Getting back to death with dignity, although Oregon allows it, many Americans go to Switzerland because the Swiss law is much more works much better for them. Will the Swiss law be a consideration if we introduce it here in Vermont, or are we tied up with the Oregon concept?
I'm not. I have to admit ignorance, and as governor, I will tell you when I'm ignorant. I'm not that familiar with the Swiss law as compared to the Oregon law. I know the Oregon law. I know it works, but I'm not all that familiar with the Swiss law.
Dr. Richter, do you know why some people feel they have to go to Switzerland?
I do not know. I do think that what we need to do is ensure that people who partake in this, that they certainly, we're not dealing with people who are clinically depressed and want to end their life as a result of that, and that is something that could be treated. I'm not familiar with the Swiss law either.
But the Oregon law does a great job of dealing with the question that Dr. Richter just raised. They use medical professionals to make the judgment that the request is based upon the kind of example that I just outlined, that I just mentioned, which is, the constituent in Ludlow who's going to have a really tough ending to her life, and you're talking about days, not months, versus someone who is clinically depressed. And Oregon hasn't missed on that yet, so clearly they have a pretty good model. You have to protect the most vulnerable.
I understand there's a problem with pain management at the end of life, too.
Mm-hmm.
You probably know a lot about that, Dr. Richter.
Yes, I do. And I do know that almost every physician I know has hastened patients' death as a result. These are people who are basically in a coma, irreversible, hours, days from death. Most doctors I know, when I was doing inpatient many years ago, that was sort of an accepted thing. You knew if you gave the patient a little bit of extra morphine, that they would die hours sooner, and certainly keep their families from having to suffer along with their loved one. So that is something. I mean, we don't want to see people in pain. And if someone is in an irreversible state, and headed to death, to allow them to continue to suffer when we can actually alleviate that. It really, I think most physicians feel that that is something that they don't want to see. They don't want to see that a patient suffer like that. And again, have given more than perhaps was medically indicated. Most physicians I know, that is the case.
That's a reason, though, to have the death with dignity law.
Absolutely, absolutely. We shouldn't have to put people in that position of thinking like, boy, you know, maybe this would be something that would affect me, you know, my career or such if this were found out. But I do know that when I was in medical training, that this was something that happened quite a bit.
They trained you to?
No, they didn't train you, but the point was that, you know, I mean, I'm looking back at a case of a woman who was dying of breast cancer and was already in essentially a coma. She was hours from death. And, you know, if you gave her a little bit of extra morphine, then her breathing would stop sooner. We're not talking about where she's going from playing tennis to we're giving her some extra morphine and now that's not what we're talking about. This is really where we're talking about a change in hours. And that, you know, to be forced in that position is really, I mean, again, I had a family member that was a situation. My uncle was on life support and never wanted to be. And, you know, the doctor was trying to help him die more peacefully, but he was sort of caught in between about what he should do, because looking at the chart and saying, gee, you shouldn't have given this much morphine. So we shouldn't put physicians in this position. As you said, this should be something that should be allowed legally, like it is in Oregon.
That's the point, is it should be a choice. And you know, as a society, we're so uncomfortable talking about the end of our lives, which unfortunately we all know, if we're going to face reality, is inevitable. And you know, I'm a part of the problem. I fear death. I have a tremendous fear of dying. I love being on this earth. But it's interesting that we clearly understand that we have to plan very carefully for the beginning of life. You don't sort of have, you know, a system where when you become pregnant, we don't figure out how to bring that child into the world in a really safe and responsible and healthy and comfortable manner. And it's ironic that we're so uncomfortable giving individuals the ability to have some control over their last 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 days on this earth if they're suffering from a chronic illness. So the first thing we have to do is start talking about the fact that yes, life has a beginning and life has an ending, and all of us should be having those conversations with our loved ones about how we want to exit, as well as just as we have a responsibility to talk about when one of our family members is pregnant. We celebrate that joy, and we talk about how are we going to be sure that we bring that baby into this world in a safe and hospitable way.
I also find it perplexing that we're even having this conversation when we allow 45,000 people to die every year because they have no health insurance.
Yeah, that's worth mentioning.
We're allowing people to die of preventable illnesses because they have no health insurance. And then when someone is at the end stage of an illness, we're saying, no, you're not allowed to die. You're not allowed to just do this. It seems preposterous that we're even having a discussion about it when you consider that we seem to have no problem allowing people to die of having no health insurance.
As governor, it's a discussion among many that I will help lead in this state. We need to be the best place to live, to work, to run a business, to raise a family, and I think we can also be the best state to grow old.